And we're back with episode number 2 of Black Sheep Thinking Series interview series. Episode number 2.
Yeah.
Buddy.
Hey, man.
Welcome back to the studio. Yeah.
Here we are.
We are here today to bring in another great friend and former client to share their experience with Black Sheep Thinking, about who they are and what it was like to be with us and work with Black Sheep Thinking. And today we have a great friend, William Riddell.
Hello.
Why don't you start off by letting people know a little bit about who you are?
Okay. I'm William. I'm 24. I run a small business called Top Pick Painters just out of Belleville. And yeah, that's basically takes the majority of my time. On my free time, I enjoy to do some stuff outdoors, camping, fishing, things of that nature. And other than that, it's basically work and work out once in a while.
Yeah, that's when you say you run a business. I mean a lot of people that run businesses, but you are one of the most brilliant business minds and caring entrepreneurs I've met in a long time.
Thank you.
Yeah, you really do care about what you do and how you do it and the people you do it with.
Absolutely. And I've been fortunate to be surrounded by like a lot of really good people during my business journey. And it's made it a lot easier to do well, having a lot of great people.
Yeah, so when I met you, I mean, you had a great mindset. I knew I wanted to work with you right away because you're just the kind of person that makes a big difference in the world with your attitude and your approach to life. Well, probably people wondering, most people come and when they meet us, we have probably a coin flip of people that work with Andrew and I that are, suffering, they're dealing with problems. That wasn't really... Yeah,
they're usually going through a challenge when they come to us.
Yeah, right? Like they're dealing with something heavy.
And it's usually by referral too. So the way that you came to us and your situation is kind of unique, which is cool.
So why don't you share a little bit about that? We'll start. Like, how did you find Black Sheep Thinking?
Well, initially I was just looking for something. I just didn't... Not that I wasn't happy or that life wasn't going good, but I was looking for something that I had when I was younger that I no longer had. And it was tough to exactly pinpoint my finger, put my finger on it. I wasn't sure if that was, I really didn't think I needed therapy or counseling or something exactly geared in that fashion. So I didn't know. And then I think you brand yourself as kind of like personal development mainly.
Yeah, it's true.
And I just read the reviews and I thought, hey, like, what's there to lose by just making a contact and meeting with someone, seeing if it's the right fit for me.
Good call. Yeah,
so
I'm glad you did.
That's just how it happened.
So you stumbled upon this research,
Yeah.
Which for us, like I said, is very uncommon because a lot of people, it's like through word of mouth or through referrals. So for you to pop in that way was awesome. And so what made you decide, like, after our first meeting, because, a lot of people come in our first meeting and they like it, but they're like, wow, this isn't what I expected. What was your experience when you came in initially? Do you remember?
A lot of time, like when I make decisions, like when I made the dive into the program, was mainly because of who you were. I wanted to surround myself with people who I thought like shared similar mindsets, similar ideals to me. And usually, like, I always believe that iron sharpens iron. So it wasn't that I necessarily knew exactly what I was going to get out of the program diving in, because it's very challenging to articulate what Black Sheep Thinking even is, or exactly what you're going to get.
Yeah, we find
for
sure.
We
struggle with it too.
It is a challenge.
If somebody referred it to me, it would have been a lot like simpler to make that decision. But I was basically just making the decision on who you were, or who I thought you were after meeting with you.
Right. I faked it really well.
Yeah. Now after the program, I'm like, oh my goodness, what did I get myself into?
And that's the best part about, like, because I really feel like in our time together, we journeyed, is like we became close friends, and I just have so much respect and love for you because of, what you've been through and who you are, and just the kind of impact I know you have and will have as you continue to grow. Because, I mean, how old are you again? 24?
24, yeah.
24, you said. So it's like you're so young and you have such great head on your shoulders. What do you, when we started working together early on, like you said, you weren't coming in with like, oh man, I could see things that I knew that would be an opportunity for you, but it's really hard to be able to tell a brand new person that's in your life to be like, hey, here's all your issues.
Yeah.
What was it outside of like looking to develop as a person? What was it that made you invest and make a choice like that?
I was sick of being in the same place or I felt like I was in the same place emotionally and mentally for a long time. Things in my life were like happening. My business was progressing. I was learning a lot of new skills, but like who I was, and my clarity on my own thoughts was just not fully there.
Right.
And like who I wanted to be, how I wanted to shape myself in the future. And I just needed a push and some guidance to get me to like exactly where I wanted to go.
Yeah, because your
long-term.
journey was so beautiful. I can't wait for you to start to share a little bit more about that journey, because it was like everyone's path up the mountaintop is really unique.
It really is.
And it's like they all climb the same mountain in different ways and what they take along the way. And you kind of had a really interesting journey where it's like growth. And I thought, oh man, and then there was like another layer for you. And so, let's talk a little bit about that. Like, what were some of the things that during your climb on this metaphoric mountain that you early on, if you remember, and then kind of as you progress, what did you take away?
Well, there's one huge main thing that was like the most impactful, and that was the concept of like identity being separate from who you are. The identity
Right.
that you create and how people see you, or how you want people to see you, is not necessarily who you are. And putting too much stress on your identity has at least for me, had a really negative impact on my life and the decisions that I made.
Because you're all work.
Yeah, exactly.
You're
So
all work. You love your job so much.
I do. I love what I do, and I love like building cool things with cool people. Like that's I guess just who I am. And it's just I put too much of my own ego and identity, and it was wrapped up in that, and I couldn't separate myself from it. And it took me like quite a while, like, and it was definitely because of the program, to separate those two things. And as a result, I felt like a lot more secure as myself as a person. If the business was going poorly or we had like a downswing, I wasn't upset. It wasn't wrapped up in who I was. It wasn't going to change how I acted outside of the business, right? Whereas before it was like, oh, we had a really good week or we had a really good month, and
that would be where you were in your happiness scale.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm on the top.
That would play a
end.
part in how you showed up, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And then if it was poor, I was like stressed out, like anxious, like not taking care of myself, like just trying to basically force things to work, as opposed to like taking a step back, relaxing. Okay, this is the sandbox. How do I want to go about executing this? And it also gave me the freedom to like try things in business, like
and
not worried about people saying, oh, you shouldn't have said that, or you shouldn't have done that, or this, that, or the next thing. It's like, it gave me the freedom to experiment. And because of that, like we can shorten our learning curve by failing quickly.
Right. And you
not tying that into who we are. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And when I
great.
first met you, I was like, I mean, you're super articulate and you have a great mindset. Like you really know how to invest in yourself, grow and learn. You know how to empty your cup and grow. But like every conversation with you was just really like, there was just no William. There was only kind of William within his work environment. And that was the whole conversation with you.
Yeah.
You're like, hey, how's your day? It would be like work, or like, hey, what are you doing for fun? It'd be like work. And because you love it so much and you take such joy in it, which is great. But then I just noticed that was one thing we started like shifting into like, who are you when you're not that?
Yeah.
And that was a big thing for you to be like, man, that don't take time for me. I'm not investing in me. Even though you were doing things that most don't, like exercise and focusing on well-being, it was like there was no you outside of that. And separating that for you was such an amazing thing to like meet the real you underneath the work, because that's such a great gift. But what's the gift of you when you're not tied to that has been really growing. And I remember like probably around 6 weeks of the 12 weeks we spent together, it was like you were such a great spot so quickly. And it's like, oh, this guy's really got it. And then there was another level for you.
I think it was like session 8 when we did specifically that one practice. And I remember that experience. It really stuck with me. And that was that second leg up. And then from there, it was like slower progression through the end, and more so talking from a place of like my root and who I am, as opposed to you speaking to my identity after that point. So that was...
let's speak, because that's such a great... We're going to try to describe the taste of salt. And I love, you always I love how you came and recognized your own language. So what we call the truth of who you are, you call your root. And I love that. So you started to recognize it. And there was that moment for you. Because before you were like, oh, this stuff really helps and I'm not understanding it. And it was really applied as more than information, but like...
logically applied to my life, as opposed to a true understanding and incorporation into who I am.
Yeah. And then you had that moment and it was just like a light bulb went off in you. What occurred in that moment for you, from the moment of like, oh, this stuff is awesome and it's making my life better. And then boom, like a whole level of William where you're like free and could show up in just such an organic way. And then insight started pouring in. What was happening?
It's like knowing what to do versus knowing why you're doing what you're doing.
Wow.
Is the difference between the two things.
Nice.
Yeah, that's
And
really good.
yeah, then you just come from that place as opposed to using the information to live.
Yeah, so you weren't using it as a strategy anymore. It just was.
It just was, exactly.
Yeah. And so for you, if you had to help people understand any of that stuff, what occurred for you in that moment, like that was different than what it was before? Because that's really well said. Be like, it's not, you know.
For my experience personally, I got an essence of like that childlike simplicity back to who I was. And then my identity was separate from that. And because of that, I could let go of all the insecurities and all the pressure to do things that were maintaining that identity or how people viewed me from the outside. I used to care so much about that. And now it's like, not at all, because I want to live from where I am and who I am. And I want people to see that part of me, not the, hey, this is the identity that I've created. Like, I'm doing all these things and I get stressed out if I'm not upholding it.
Right.
Awesome. It's right. You know what? That actually ties back into what Morgan said in our last episode. What you just said there about, I brought my childlike simplicity into everything I did. Because we were talking about how people say, oh, I wish I knew what I know now back then. Yeah. And it's like, what if you took back then and brought it forward with you? And that childlike simplicity, like you just said it.
It's true.
And so that's really kind of like what this work does. It allows you to open up to that, right? Like
the simplicity of life, that it's not complicated. We complicate it.
Yeah. And just stripping all the baggage and pressure of, like, once again, I keep going back to the word identity and how that's separated from who you are. And like that, there's just such a driver of like performance anxiety if you're tied up in it. And then it's going to bleed into your life. How, like, for me, the biggest thing for me is work. Yeah. So if work's going terrible, I'm not.
Life's going terrible.
Yeah, exactly. As opposed to saying my life's great, work is struggling right now.
That's okay. It's a challenge versus that's beautiful.
That's amazing.
Well, another thing is like to get a little bit deeper, if that's okay, is like, of course, your motivator when I first met you, I saw was like kind of like it was proving from a past situation that you were doing.
Oh yeah.
And you were like, I want to do this to prove myself.
Yeah.
And to prove that I'm worthy, to prove that I'm enough. And that was an amazing healing moment for you. I don't think you even knew you had to deal with at that point. I knew to some degree, like, or at least I felt it. Yeah, it was like over here. Like, you know, you grew up like many of us did. Many in this room and many that we deal with a family environment that was different to you.
Yep. And
you had a very successful father, and who was not as successful at being nurturing and connected to you as you hoped for.
Yeah,
and because and there was a part of you that was connected to wanting to become successful, not just and here's a really amazing part about you. Your success model was based off of love and kindness and integrity and giving and how you care for the people around you, because what you didn't have. But there was a part of it that was like, I want to show him.
Yeah.
I want to, and that part of you, it was like, that was the part where when I first met you, I was like, he can have this and not be tied to that part with where his past was. And I just remember like bringing it to you, and you're like, at first it was almost like, I don't want to look at it.
I don't want to talk about it.
This is fine. And then really within that meeting, it was, or two tops, it was like very much like,
that was a marathon session.
It really
3
was.
hours we spoke.
You remember, yeah.
I do remember that session, and we did the chairs.
We did, and you had such an eye-opening understanding of like, I can love the people that haven't loved me properly, and the forgiveness that you've created in your life, and it shifted you. So that's why I thought right away, I was like, oh man, this guy gets it, and you did. All that forgiveness, all that understanding to be like, okay, I accept him. So for a man that you were like, one point thought, one day I'm going to be successful and in spite of him,
yes.
Right? And now I'm going to be happy despite him. Like, it doesn't, not to spite him, but because that was the gift that your dad gave you. And I thought, oh man, that's such a beautiful thing. And that growth for you, just alone, would have been enough for me. As your coach,
that was step one.
It was you, yeah. And then I didn't realize for you there was a whole nother layer. And so because I was like, oh man, like some people get it quick. You're dedicated as a student to everything you do. And when you came in, I'm like, man, this guy's so fun to work with. And we had challenging, but not overly, resistance, but like challenging conversations, because that's what it is. And you showed up for them, and for you to have that love for the people that, you know, weren't able to be there for you in that understanding. I thought this is great. And then there was like a whole nother level for you of letting go of it. So, you know, what is that like for you now that you're not carrying around that? Did you lose any fuel because some people out there, I think, believe they lose the part of them.
I think I can articulate on this. So like initially I was using like this idea of, hey, I'm going to do well because, pardon my language, but fuck you. You held money over us and that's how you controlled us. And obviously like never trying to give us enough, making it hard for us in life. And I was using that as fuel to be like, I'm going to make so much money that nobody can ever control me and I get to do everything and I can go to you and say, you know, fuck you, I did it. Despite you, I was still able to do it. And it was kind of like that motivation of, okay, you make this much money? Well, I'm going to triple it by the time you even got out of school. So then there's zero contest about who you are versus where I got to.
Right. Look what I did and I'm doing it the right way.
And it was coming from such like a bad place. Like obviously I was using that as fuel in the early days to really drive myself forward. But then that becomes very toxic in the sense of, or maybe toxic is not the right word, but it becomes wrapped up in my identity, similar to how I keep saying like, then work overflows and it's not going well. And then that's my entire life because
it's not getting you to the point that you thought you need to get to prove your worth, your enoughness, and your love.
Exactly. As opposed to feeling those things and then deciding to work anyways, because I love what I like coming from work from a place of love as opposed to using fuel from
like a revenge air quotes.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like,
did you lose? Do you think in accepting that part in healing, and then now you look at your ambition before and your ambition now, did you lose anything?
I think I feel less pressure. I don't think I've lost any productivity by any stretch of the imagination, but it's made it a lot more enjoyable to work.
I just love these. That's an important part that people need to connect with, because a lot of them think if they let go of that chip on their shoulder, if they stop being mad at anyone from the past that's wounded them, that they're not going to be able to be where they want to be.
Well, you gain clarity. You might like, maybe the amount of time I work has dropped like 10%.
Right.
But the clarity I have when I work is definitely increased, like work output.
Yeah. So what you're, to say it for those of you that don't speak brilliant logically, William, it sounds to me like you have more time for you now. You're happier. And you're still more or equally as productive.
Yeah, definitely.
And you're more connected to your work.
And
what could you ask for?
I like who I am a lot more.
And that's important. Yeah, it's important. You're the foundation of so many people's experience. So people forget that. Like
how I was living before is like I can't even compare it to how I live now. From the outside, it would look the same, like for the most part about what I'm doing, but inside it feels way different.
That's brilliant to say.
So for those of you that are listening and couldn't hear Joe, what he said is what a gift that when you worked through the anger and healed, what the gift that gave you, right? And so that's just for you guys that couldn't hear what Joe said.
And so it's super powerful for people, because so many people are like trying to, I mean, you're kind of the opposite spectrum. Other people are like, they get hurt and they're like, I'm going to destroy my life to prove how much someone hurt me. And you went the other way to be like, I'm going to work really, really hard to prove, you know, what it could be. And for you to find balance in that, to be able to, you know, not change the outside, but change the inside and work from a more organic place. That's the gift, because the gift is you get to be the real you and still have everything you wanted. And you're just cleaning out the fuel, right? I think you brought that term, dirty fuel. Is that
dirty fuel?
Dirty fuel. You know, now you have clean fuel and you get to burn it. And I love more that one thing that we brought awareness for you for is like, where were you in all that? You know, that you were helping people, that you're so loving as a man in business to take care of your staff, and it's important to you, and to take care of your clients, very important to you. I mean, you'll be in meetings, and I'm not really strict when it comes to that. Your phone will go off, and you're like, I'm gonna go ahead and you check in and be like a review or a client check in. You're like, I just want to make sure that we did a great job, and it's always, that's one thing you always represented love, and there was just one person missing it for you in the formula, which was you. And for you to see that and then just run with it is so beautiful, that now you're taking time to do the things you love. You're taking time away from work, not to get away from work, because you're like a modern day, I think a great kind of workaholic is a bad term, because it sounds like, you know.
I'm not balanced, but if I love what I do, so it's like I want to do a lot of it.
Exactly. And there's nothing
why
wrong with that,
not,
especially as a
right?
young
Why
man,
not?
as you're building a great thing for
And
everybody.
it's like the risk to me to do it right now is less than it will ever be. I don't have a girlfriend. I don't have kids. I don't have
not yet. This guy, he's single.
Yeah, build well. Yeah, if there's any single ladies, well,
call me.
Up for grabs.
He needs a distraction. And so, but I mean it, man. It's like for you to shift into that loving aspect for yourself and to spend time. And I saw it energize you. I saw how you started to recognize that you were missing the formula, and for you to take time because you love what you do so much. It was almost like a punishment at first to be like, but I love work. I'm like, yeah, I know you do. I know. And so sometimes like 80% is 100% and 100% is 80%. Because people aren't, when they're all focused on one thing, they're not rounded. And
you don't have clarity.
Right.
You need to be away from something in order to be, and come back to it a little ways after to be fully clear on it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And
that's great.
Like for me, like the gym or being out on the lake is a really good spot to,
I know you love your
think
fishing.
outside of work.
Yeah, just focus on something other than what you're trying to solve.
We
do that a lot of times too. When something comes into our lives, we'll just kind of like let it settle and like don't know the answer right now, but I'm sure it'll come eventually. And then usually in time, when you leave it alone, the answer will start to come to you. You just sit with it and allow it to have a space, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important thing to even go a little bit deeper on, because every time, like in psychology and the thinking, we have a problem, we think we have to solve that problem.
Mm-hmm.
And we spend so much time adding extra thinking to thinking that it just compounds it. Rumination occurs. We can't get away from the feeling.
Yep.
And so when I go through something like, the last couple of weeks, I've had some stuff I'm working on, and they said, what do you do with it? And I was like, I'm going to shit sit. And they're like, what's that? I'm like, you just sit in it, but with presence. And what happens is you don't understand. It's not so much about why. It's like, but then all of a sudden insight occurs on what it really is, and you can see it clear, like we're talking about. And I think it's important that we spend time realizing that bad emotions shouldn't be ran from, sit through them, but don't like spend so much time focusing on the problem. And that's one thing we talked about with psychology. It's like I think they put the horse before the cart, right? It's like if you understand why, then you'll feel better. And then our thing is, if you learn to feel better and you sit in the feeling you want, then the solution comes.
Yeah.
And that's a major difference.
Yeah. And you know that you can be okay sitting in a negative emotion, that it's not, you're not, because when you know you're not your emotions, you can allow a negative emotion to sit and allow it to just, like he said, sit in that for a little while, allow it to have space, and then know that the answer is going to come from wisdom and from being who you want to be in that.
Right. It's like separating and looking at it from like 30,000 feet and be like, oh, okay, rather than being like, oh, what do I do? What do I do? It's like, well, you'll never know as long as you're thinking about what. The answer to not thinking isn't more thinking.
Yeah.
Man, what any other things? Because there's such a beautiful journey, and I love that moment where you like pop. How if you would describe the experience of where you were with this understanding, and then that moment, what did it feel like to elevate into a place of knowing you're not your thinking?
I would say like initially after it happened, I was like basically elated, right? I was coming off of that high of, okay, like I took another leap in my understanding and my comfortability in who I was. And then finally I came back and settled in and found that balance between like work and living in that feeling and getting outside of work, and just everything around me that's happening was basically separate from who I was. And I was going to just allow who I was to come into everything that I was doing. And so there was no more, I want to force this thing to work. It was, I'm going to try this thing and see if it works. I'm going to just measure the data. And it's like, oh, no, this doesn't work, or this does. And then it was just basically free to play in the sandbox of life, right?
We're stuck in the sandbox. The place you visited to have fun.
I talked to that about like one guy we just brought on at work actually, and I was explaining the concept of the sandbox, and it's like, this is just our testing ground. We're just having fun with this, and we're going to build something together. And it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to put something out that some people don't like. It's like you can pivot, you can correct, and it's always better to do it when you're smaller than when you have a lot more eyeballs on you.
Well, I was always told like, $10,000 problems are the same as $1 million problems. it's just the amount of thinking we have about that problem that makes it feel big, and there's no difference.
It's also, you're going to make a mistake, and if you take a step up, you're going to make a bigger mistake.
It's true.
You're going to make $1,000 mistake, and then if you get big enough, you're going to make a $10,000 mistake, and then you'll make your first $100,000 mistake, and so
and there's
on.
no difference between any of those mistakes. They're just mistakes.
Exactly.
It's
right?
just our judgment on how big they are and how small they are. Right?
Exactly. And in whatever realm you're in, there's like a specific amount of like ignorance that you have to pay down, because you just don't know what you don't know until you know it. And it's the same with this program. Like, I didn't even know what I didn't know until I knew it. And then it's like, okay, now I can take a step back, understanding what I do now and come at it from a different place. But the next time you try and push to that next level, there's going to be those growing pains of not knowing what you don't know.
That actually is a really good point that speaks to a lot of some of the resistance, I guess, that we have in the work, is people who will show up and cling so tightly to what they already do know that they're not willing to admit that maybe there is something they don't know. And so that, I think that's what probably spoke to your growth so much, was that you were willing to say, okay, I don't know, and I'm willing to open up to the idea of this.
I was resistant on that, because I always
not as resistant as you think. I
remember you spoke to me about, like, because I would always look at things in such like a logical, pragmatic manner, and it was like, you're like, just let's open up a little bit.
Yeah, it's true. Actually, that's great insight to bring to the podcast. It's like, people want to look at it through the lens they already have, and not change out the lens. And so, yeah, that's a good point. Like, it's interesting, because I remember the moment you kind of, had that pop of, you were just like, I took a notepad and a pen, and you were just speaking things, and we keep talking, and I was like writing because insight was pouring out of you. And I remember one moment you're like, oh, you talk to people's identity from the bottom of the hill until the real them shows up. That's hard. And I was like, man, thanks for seeing that.
Yeah.
Like, that's how much awareness you start to have. You recognize what the journey is for people from the outside.
You're talking to the person's mask, basically, and they don't even know it's a mask, right? Because until you understand the concept of like identity being separate from root of who you are, then it's when it opens up, because for the longest time you believe identity is who you are because it's how people view you.
It's so true. Yeah.
It's true. You're speaking to the intangible, and people are so caught on like proof and evidence and being able to see that it, touch and feel and see that it exists. And when you can't do that, you gotta fight through that mask. So
absolutely.
And we only have two ways, we say. It's like, you can experience it with us, which is what we try to create, and then you can also communicate it. And so if people are stubborn in the communication and they're resistant and they don't want to feel that, it's like, we're really stuck here without a tool. Now, thankfully, that doesn't happen very often. The people come in are looking and open-minded because they're there for something, and we want to give it to them, but to be able to receive it, and then just for you to get to that level of knowing, and then the lightness that came with you is so inspiring, because we, as coaches too, we get to witness you, and we're like, man, it's like every time, it doesn't matter how many times we see it, we're like, it's kind of a miracle that we don't control. That the client has to, the person that we're working with has to show up and decide, and then allow it to happen, and to watch you bloom. It's like so cool to witness, this great guy, and then the other side of that.
Do you ever find it, well, I guess frustrating wouldn't be the right word, but it must be difficult to some degree to talk to people's identity, through the first 3, 6, 9 sessions it takes.
Well, that's funny you say that, because this last couple of weeks, the hardship I had, so the normal path for people is that they do show up resistant. They're scared. They're hurt. They've been wounded. They've tried to create themselves because that's how they were taught. So I'm used to that. When it gets to past meeting 6 and we're past halfway in the journey and there's still a lot of it, and people, the best clients, they'll think resistance is like, I had a tough day. I'm like, no, that's not resistance. This is how we apply it. But the last couple, like I've had a couple clients in the last, few months that the resistance was like, they would come back the same version of themselves. Like we'd help them get there and they come back and it was like, they took nothing with them. And I think the biggest part is that people recognize, like, it's not just a meeting. This is a way of understanding, and they have to apply it outside. What happens outside of our time together is equally, if not more important than what happens together. And that's the difference between, you and the high 90% of people that transform is you took it and ran with it and said, this is something that's beneficial, and you become your own testimony, versus others that often will just think that it's a concept. They show up and it's very small. We're lucky, but it just happened that I had a couple that the anger and the resistance and the holding on to their pain was much stronger than the will to want to grow. And people don't want to be accountable to their stuff because the world on the outside needs to change for them to be happy. You, like many great clients, recognize that you are the change. That you are the creation. The world doesn't revolve around us. That's what our parents might have told us, but it does in the creation of our lives. That we are the energy that shows up to influence that. And when you realize that and you're not dealing with it, it's much more beautiful. So I know there's resistance. I had massive resistance on my growth journey, as did Andrew, as did Joe. We all had it early on. I think the difference is we knew that there was something better out there. And I always ask, like, how many people need to change before people recognize that there is something for them here, and for them to be willing to come in and be like, I want this, versus like that wall. Yeah. That because the wall makes sense early on, but what we need to show you to know that there is something for you, and that I don't mind resist. I think it's an important part, that resistance, and I enjoy that part because that's the transformation. But if you're holding on to your pain so much that you're like, okay, pry it out of my hand, we can't do that. My job's not to pry your hand open and jam it in there. Our job is to help you relax enough to receive. Let it go. Yeah. And so, but I'm very lucky because I don't know if it's by luck or by design, but the people that come to us who are black sheep in their hearts, they want to transform. But yeah, the last couple of weeks, I had a couple that were just like, nope. And yeah, that is energetically for me. It can be very tiring, not because I'm impatient with them, but you're facing something that's like, use the word like a demon in front of the actual person. And it's almost like an exorcism situation where you're like, how do I get past that front to the real person behind?
Because they believe like that pain is who they are.
That's
right?
And that's the defense, and that's I can't change. A lot of limiting beliefs on what the situation needs to be. And then people think because it feels like therapy, we are therapy. We're not. We never claimed to be. We're not, and we don't want to dig into your past too much. We want to heal, but we want to create something from an understanding that allows you to get what you want out of life with ease, which you've experienced. And so, yeah, thanks for honoring that. But I don't mind. The resistance is an important part because that's the thing that is in the way, and that is our job. I just, but once it gets to like meeting 6, 7, 8, getting halfway, you're like, but I never lose hope. It's amazing. Like one of the ones that was the most resistant, like it was like the last meeting, it was like something popped in meeting 11, they brought her into meeting 12 completely different, and now she's holding on to it, and it's what it is for her. And so for people like you, there, sometimes people need a little more time. There's no rush. However, people like you, it's really enjoyable because once you got there, it wasn't like there was nothing for us on the other end. It's like, oh, cool, I got this. Now what? Well, let's apply it more and have fun with it. Yeah. Let's see what we can polish this already shiny rock and turn it into an even better looking diamond.
Yeah, how much more can we create now from this place? So it's never a waste.
The conversation never ends. Like we could talk for another, 6 months. It would be very different than our first 3 months. But there's always something there for people. And even for me, we're constantly growing as coaches in this understanding and how to apply it and how to become not more efficient, but that'd be the closest words. Like, how do I create flow longer? Mm-hmm. How do I, when I go through something, you spend less time and more time in it? So even currently right now, like my wife's not doing well health-wise, and every time someone finds out about it, they're like, oh, that sounds hard. I'm like, hard as if she dies. Challenging but what part of your life hasn't been challenging? Like everyone here has had a challenging life. I don't know anyone out there. Well, some of them I probably do that I'm watching, but the ones I don't, I know one thing about them. Their life is messy. Yeah. Just like mine. Right? So in that messiness, when you start to see it as challenges that allow us to prove who we are and use this understanding to get through, things get far softer and easier. And so I don't see it as like hardships all the time, very rarely. But I still hit walls like everyone else. And when I do,
it's still a human experience.
Yeah. I am a human. I am a human.
That reminds me of one thing during our time together that you shared with me, and it was that idea of like, where are you on the scale of contentness? Like, what % of the time, roughly, are you content? And right. The more and more and more I've thought about that stuck with me. I'm generally a numerical person. You said I spend 90 or I think it was 90% of the time you spend in your content zone. Yeah. And that probably that other 10% of the time you're spending closer to your identity.
It's true.
Right. And it's true. That finding that balance of this is who I'm not my identity, and
Correct.
I can be happy from this place regardless of how things are going around me
On
in
the
world.
outside, yeah. And so it's not to say like in that 10%, like I suffer like everyone else. I got, I get overwhelmed at moments and realize what that really is. I get sad because that's okay too. And I get frustrated. And then I go back into that 90% and use that to soothe the 10%. I use that understanding to open up to what's the meaning of this, rather than like thinking like, what's the, oh, the reason this is happening is because I'm being tested. But there's times where I'm like, oh, I think life coaches us.
Yeah.
And that gives us on the next level. And I think it's a Justin Timberlake quote, believe it or not, that said, every level of your life will expect a new version of you.
Right.
And that's the evolution of why this is continual. Like, when do you want to stop spiritually growing? When do you want to stop growing? Never. So, but before, I didn't have the same tool that we're giving. It was more like willpower and, silver lining and manifesting and the secret of believing. Now it's more like those things are kind of like thought processes. But for me, it was like, oh, I understand now that like this is a part of me that I need to grow. And where do I grow from? The root of the truth of who we are allows me to open up and go, okay, I get how to approach this. And then insight occurs. And so that's why it kind of sounds like positive psychology sometimes, because people speak those words at the outcome. Like positive psychology before is like, oh, it's grass is green on the other side. That's why. And then for us, it's like you have the feeling, and then you try to describe it to someone. All you have is that kind of positive psychology language, but that's not what created it.
Yeah.
So it's much more ease and efficient from our understanding of like how to approach what you've experienced too. It's like, oh, and then it will sound like that. So when you try to explain it to people, and that's why podcasts are funny. It's like, how are you going to verbalize this? And like,
How do you explain that? How do you articulate what goes on in that program? It's pretty difficult.
Right, because it's an experience, but the sound.
It's the same reason I still haven't written the review, because I'm trying to find
how do I put this into words?
How do I really articulate this?
It's
From someone who is like starting out, right? Like, see, when I came in, it's like taking a chance basically at the start, right?
Yeah,
taking a chance on a person.
Yeah, my dream is just to have one conversation with, it's kind of like that song, I want to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony kind of thing. It's like, I love to have one meeting with everyone alive, just to plant the seed of this understanding and see what it does for them, because you never know. But what you do know is that, nobody wants to be a black sheep and nobody wants wisdom, but we know as coaches, that's what they are.
Yep.
And to be able to deliver that to them and help them see they are unique and they are everything they need would be a gift. And so that's the gift of, even having you today and having you as a friend. It's like to witness the people you love the next and do what they do with that. It's like, it's so inspiring for us. So thank you.
No, thank you. If there was more people in the world that had gone through the program and really understood and connected with that, I think we would live in a place that leads a lot more from love.
Man, wouldn't that be a wonderful thing? Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah.
So we're not going to end it on that, though. We got more time. If we can. That sounds like a perfect.
It does sound like the perfect.
And we'll be back right after this commercial about how. But thanks, William. So I'm just curious, like, if there was anything else that you've gained or anything you want to share from, because you bring such great wisdom to the table too. I love that you, as a client, you would bring stuff in from books you're reading or things, and you would really get it. I mean, because a lot of people, when they're in the journey, they want to get it egoically. They want it because they're so smart, and you never let your intelligence, like Mark Twain said, never let your schooling interfere with your education. That's one thing you were always willing to put down, is like what you knew, and when you came with something, it was always like a yes and, which is because a lot of clients early on will send videos or stuff like that, and we get a lot of those, by the way, and we just say, Joe's laughing off camera, we get a lot. People don't realize, how many, full-time work it is to go through people's understanding of the clips they send from socials. And sometimes I just write like, that ain't it. It's like, and it missed the point. Joe's laughing because it's like, bro, is this it? and there's some great stuff out there. We're not the only one talking this language, but some things are still pushing people into just trying to willpower their identity or their thoughts. What other things, or what other thoughts, concepts, what things have you come to with your own insights, that, or things you've read or brought in that you think are of great value to people listening if they wanted to understand more about what we do?
I think a lot of the things that you read and connect to value, you understand more after you learn the foundation. And I'm an avid reader. I was a much more avid reader actually before the program.
Did I bring reading for you?
No, well, I was reading because I was looking for something. I
Reading
didn't
from need.
Yeah, I didn't really know what I was looking for. So, like a lot of people, you read a lot of self-help books. You read a lot of wisdom-related books. And I would say like the one that really clicked for me, and I think speaks some similar language to the program, would be honestly the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu.
Sorry.
There's just a couple quotes, especially about leadership in there, that really stuck with me for a long time. And one of them is along the lines of, it's a longer passage, but it basically speaks like about the best leader being one who, once the work is done, all the people or the whole team says, wow, like we did this all by ourselves. Like, and really being able to acknowledge like other people's impact on what's happening, and never minimizing that, never minimizing somebody else, doing the opposite, like acknowledging everything that they have contributed to that overarching vision.
Like lifting others up.
And well, everybody wants to be part of something, and I want everybody to be part of something, especially like who we have at our company right now is like everybody is driving towards this very specific goal, and you could just feel this energy and this culture around everybody, and everybody wants to work hard. It's not we have to work hard, it's we want to, because we are making an impact, we are doing something.
We're doing it together.
Exactly. And that's one of probably my favorite passages.
It's probably and one of the reasons why we did these is for that, and that you came, that's why I made such a natural guest for us to be like, here's a guy that is building that on his own. Before we even met, you knew that was such an important part of your experience, that you are like an invisible leader, so to speak. You know, it's like,
I'm definitely not like fully invisible, but I try to acknowledge.
What I mean by that is like credit for you is not where you're not about credit. You're never about credit. Matter of fact, you'll deflect it in a true, honest, authentic way because you're highlighting that you are less without the people you love. Absolutely.
What we've done so far, in the past like 12 months, I couldn't have done without the people around me.
It takes a village, right? So
it's never going to be one person. Like nothing great comes from one single, or maybe I shouldn't say that because maybe I would be mistaken, but the greatest things come from.
Look, Elon Musk.
I don't think anybody has ever, created anything great completely on their own.
Yeah, Elon Musk is a brilliant man. Couldn't do it without the people he works with. We feel the same way. Everything I've ever accomplished, whether it was like a toilet paper charity, we had 100 volunteers. I can't do that without people buying in. I've had great ideas before when people don't buy in.
Yeah,
it's just an idea. You can only take it so far. So I think we have to honor that there's a reason community is such an important part, and it's not something you can force. It's only something you can cultivate, and that's something you've been so gifted at, and you see it so clearly. And so that was one reason when we met. I was like, this young man, almost twice your age. It was a Monday. this young man really gets what real leadership is today, and to the point where like I know your business. I understand how you work, and it was never about identity even for you in the work. Yes, identity came into play into your happiness, but you've always worked from a place of selflessness, and you put your clients first, you put other people first, and I love that you're now putting yourself on the same level. That's the biggest difference in the change in you. But I love how you approach that whole concept of we're building something, and it's about the people that are around me, and that's what really love is for you in that work, and I love it. It's beautiful, man. William, thank you so much for coming in today, man. I really appreciate you sharing your journey. If there's anything you want to say for you or others at this point, I'll let you steal the mic.
I would just say it was a pleasure being here.
Amen. For us too.
Love a chance to share and talk about it.
Thank you for being so kind to open up and share how a great, successful man built more success on top by understanding really who he is. And it's been a pleasure to work with you, be your friend, and witness you. It's inspiring. And I hope those out there realize that the people that come see us aren't always suffering from those things, but they're just great people looking to have a greater life, a better life. And some of them don't even know what it could be.
Definitely.
And so thanks for giving us a shot and for the commitment of your time and love. And we wish you great success. And this won't be the last time we see each other, obviously, because you're stuck with me now. Thanks for joining us for our second episode. I hope you enjoyed, William. If you want to check out how to find his incredible talents with his team, where should they go?
Yeah, give us shameless plug, bro.
Toppickpainters.com.
Amazing website, amazing work. And of course, if you want to connect more with us, come check us out at blacksheepthinking.ca. And you can find us on our socials under Black Sheep Thinking, just like it's spelled normally.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time for episode 3. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Signing off
Thanks so much, guys. Much love.
Thank you. Take
See you next
care.
time.